Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. So I'm sitting here this afternoon with Chris Voigt. Chris is the executive director of the Washington Potato Commission. So Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. Looking forward to our little talk and conversation here.
You were introduced to me by a previous guest about on the Cascade Bicycling Club, and they interviewed you for their blog and about the STP. And so we're going to talk bicycling for a second, but also this fry truck that you guys have. I got a lot of potato questions for you, but before we go down that, why don't you give us a little bit of backstory? So you're in the Moses Lake area. How did you end up with the Washington State Potato Commission and ultimately then in Moses Lake?
Oh boy, we got to go way back. Started out in high school, really, or just growing up. I was actually raised in Oregon, in kind of a smaller town, rural town, a little town called Newberg, Oregon. It's kind of the heart of wine country now in Oregon, kind of the top end of the Willamette Valley. I lived in town, but all of my friends were farm kids. Okay. And so just kind of hung out with them. And they got me involved in FFA, Future Farmers America. I don't know if you've ever seen those kids walking around. They got these.
I had them in my school.
Yeah, they get these corduroy blue jackets and black pants. Well, that was me. They got me started in it. And for whatever reason, it just took. I mean, I just really fell in love with the people. I fell in love with agriculture. I thought, everybody's got to eat. So there's always going to be some type of career ahead of you. Wonderful leadership training, and really kind of got heavily involved in it. I was elected as state FFA president in Oregon. So I had to actually postpone high school for a year, kind of travel around the state and go into every FFA chapter doing, all sorts of kind of motivational presentations and educational sessions.
So wait, they made you, that role actually required so much of you? Because I always think of FFA as a high school thing, not.
Yeah.
So the fact that you took a year off to fulfill the duties of the office is really not what I would have expected.
Yeah, and you don't get paid for it. It's really just kind of volunteer, and I think it was kind of painted back then. It's kind of an honor to be able to do that. But I look back on it now, and I really was paid in the way of just life experience. We would stay with host families wherever we went. So I probably ended up staying with 90 different families, 100 different families throughout the year. Wow. And what an amazing glimpse at Americana. I mean, you saw the whole spectrum. Mm-hmm. I remember the first family I stayed with. I think they were squatters. They picked up an old homestead, and I don't know if they were really. I'm assuming probably they were allowed to live there, but it literally was like an old abandoned home from out on the desert in Central Oregon that was probably built in the late 1800s. Wow. And there was no electricity, no running water, and I gotta say that, they were poor. Mm-hmm. Mom drove into town 25 miles away to work at the convenience store, making JoJo potatoes and frying chicken. Dad kind of set up a little saw in the back of the house outside, at a little lean-to where he was making survey stakes, like literally, just a pointed piece of wood that surveyors would poke into the ground to mark areas. And I got to tell you, Scott, man, I get emotional just thinking about it. It was the most loving family I've ever come across. I mean, they had next to nothing but happy, and we were sitting around and telling stories and laughing, and it was just an amazing experience that I had at 18-year-olds to see this family who really, literally living off of nothing and out in the middle of nowhere, just happy and loving family. It was great to see that. And then I contrast that with another family I stayed with that was incredibly rich. And they had these beautiful home on this river, a big kind of estate. I had my own guest house that I stayed in when I was with them. And it just was like a really dysfunctional family. And then I saw everything in between. And it was just an amazing experience to kind of, as an 18-year-old kid, to experience, 90, 100 different families. And I remember one family that really resonated with me. I got there and I walked in the home. Kind of how the routine was, you'd go to the next school, like at the end of the day, and you would speak at the school the next morning. So you would meet your host family that night. And I remember the ag teacher said, "Hey, Chris, before you go with this family, I want to talk to you before you leave." And I thought, sometimes a teacher say, "Hey, this kid's got potential, want you to kind of work with them and, give them some pointers." And it's usually that type of conversation the teacher wants to have with me. So we kind of got busy and I left without talking to the teacher, but I just assumed that that's what he wanted me to talk about. And I remember walking into the home and it was just, I met Mom and it was just quiet. It was probably one of the quietest homes I've ever been in. It was just kind of weird. And Dad came home later and we were sitting around, the dinner table, and I'm just talking and having fun. And I was, telling stories and talking about my family and so forth. And really it was a chance for us to kind of get to know together, each other, but we were having fun doing it. And then I was talking about asking about their family and their kids. And they talked about another daughter that they had in college and so forth and learning about her. And then they said, we have another son. And he'd died, and we'd actually just buried him last week.
Oh.
And I was like, whew, here I am, just oblivious to that, no social awareness,
Right.
having fun, laughing, and it made me feel uncomfortable. But I remember the mom came, and it's funny because I actually stayed in the bedroom of their son that passed away. And he passed away, I remember, I must have been right at daylight savings time because his clock was an hour off, And I remember waking up an hour early because the clock was off, and I had kind of that moment to myself and kind of got out in the kitchen, just kind of sitting there gathering my thoughts. And the mom came in, and she came up and said, "Chris, I got to thank you, having you in our home, and you kind of gave us permission to kind of go on with our life, by having that." And so it was an amazing experience, as an 18-year-old to really experience those types of things. So ag is really, being able to see 100 different ag families, and just the passion that they all have, it's been a really neat experience. And so that really just kind of ignited my interest in agriculture. So I went to Oregon State University, got an ag econ degree, got really involved in student government there.
Okay.
I was, I think, 3 different student body officers, and then did internships. So at some point I was going to school 6 months and then working 6 months for some different agriculture companies. Finally graduated. My first job, they shipped me off to New Jersey. I was working for a big, actually an agriculture chemical company. They transferred me. They gave me a choice of, okay, do you want to live in Jackson, Mississippi, or do you want to live in Charleston, South Carolina? And I was a surfer, also kind of learned to surf in Oregon. So I was like, hey, Charleston,
Okay.
I'm either a mountain or beach kind of guy. And so Charleston was an opportunity for me to go there. And loved living in Charleston I think I was there for about 2.5 years. Enjoyed that experience. 2.5 years is probably just about the right amount of time, I think. Came back to the Northwest and worked for another company. And they eventually transferred me to California. And what they wanted me to do was kind of launch a line of biological products to help farmers. Essentially putting good bacteria and good funguses into the soil to help rejuvenate crops and increase their fertility. I remember one of the products was like this fungus you would put in the soil called mycorrhizal fungi. And you would inoculate plants' roots with it or the seeds, and this fungus would actually attach to the roots of the plant and just spread out. And actually, they would act as a root system too. So they were picking up water and nutrients, delivering it back to the plant. And in exchange, the fungus got a little bit of nutrient or essentially sugars from the plant to keep going. And so it was like the symbiotic relationship. And so working with those types of products. And then the company decided, we're going to shut down our ag division. And I was like, oh, all right. And because I was just at the point of kind of launching this new product line, and I had to go back and because I was hyping it up and had all these magazine articles out in different ag publications. And I was thumbing through magazines to figure out, okay, did I forget to cancel an ad contract? You know, I was looking for magazines, hoping not to see my ad, that I remembered to actually cancel some of these contracts. And I picked up, I think it was a Spudman magazine.
Spudman.
Yeah, that's what it was called.
Okay.
And they had an ad. I didn't see my ad, which is good. But I saw an ad for an opening with the National Potato Promotion Board based in Denver. And the National Potato Promotion Board does kind of national advertising. It's like the beef, it's what's for dinner, but for potatoes. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at the kind of job description. I thought, yeah, I think that would be a really cool job to have. And so I was about to lose my job. And this came up. And so, you know, me and I think 80 other applicants applied and worked it down to me. And I was hired. And that's where my life of potatoes began. And so that was roughly about, 20, going on 29 years now.
When we did the pre-interview, you told me this story. And I'm gonna kind of paraphrase it back to you, okay? But I asked you how you met your wife.
Oh yeah.
And you met at a potato conference, which just made me chuckle, just because are there potato conferences? Okay, you met at a potato conference, and I know I'm skipping over things, and I might not get it 100% correctly, but I'm going in a direction. You guys started dating. And it was a long distance relationship. And if I remember correctly, you were in the Denver area and she was in the Boise area.
That's correct.
And you kind of, I think I think it's maybe safe to say you guys were torn. One of you had to move. If the relationship was going to evolve, one of you had to move. And I'd like you to tell the audience in your words how you guys decided who was going to move.
And I would love to talk to other people who've done the long distance relationship thing to see what normal people do on managing that type of decision. Because, both my wife and I, we loved our jobs and we weren't real eager to leave those. I mean, we were in love with each other.
Right.
Kind of wanted to take the relationship to the next level, but it was a really hard decision. And so we did what we thought was the right way to decide this instead of flipping a coin, which maybe some people would do when they come to an impasse. We decided to bet on a hockey game. So there was Boise has a minor league hockey team called the Steelheads. Mm-hmm. And then Colorado Springs had a minor league hockey team and they were playing.
Okay.
And so we put it all on the line. I was like, hey, whoever wins that hockey game, that's where we're going to live. So either we're going to live in Idaho or we're going to live in Colorado based upon who won that hockey game.
Now I have to ask a couple of questions here. Because we still don't know who moved yet, right? We haven't disclosed that yet. So we're building this up. But remember, hockey can have a tie. What were you guys going to do if it was a tie?
Didn't even think about that.
Okay, all right.
All right.
That's
a good point.
That's question number one I have. Question number two, were you physically at this game?
Yes. And
was it in Boise or was it in Colorado Springs?
It was in Boise.
So you gave a little bit of home field advantage to her, home ice advantage, because her team was the home team. Or I'm assuming she was betting with Boise and you were betting with Colorado.
That's correct.
Okay. So did you attend the game in person?
Yes, we did.
And before we announced the winner, was there tension between the two of you while the game was going on?
Well, and this was a 3-game stand too. And so it was like, okay, which of the 3 games are we going to pick?
Okay, I didn't think about that angle. All right.
Yeah, and which was kind of unusual. And I don't know if it was kind of towards the end of the season and, maybe they had some games to catch up on.
Okay.
So we picked the first game.
Okay.
That's the one we decided to bet on. And I think that probably, I probably had a couple beers that probably in the stands. It kind of probably helped loosen the mood a little bit to relieve some of that tension. And then they got this thing called Huck-a-Puck at the Steelhead game where they have like these foam rubber hockey pucks. It's kind of a fundraiser. And, you're supposed to like throw it and they got numbers on it and they track the numbers. And whoever's puck lands on center ice, they win like, I don't know, half the pot of money or something that was in it, something like that. And so Stephanie, my girlfriend at the time and now wife, we both each bought hockey pucks. And it wasn't part of the bet or anything, but it really kind of loosened up the mood when I'm seeing my wife, and she was a softball player in like high school, try to throw these pucks on the ice. And I remember she hit this pregnant woman right off the bat. And it just started like, busting up. And of course, the pregnant woman was fine. It was just a foam rubber puck. But yeah, we were kind of having fun with it. And it was actually, I got to admit, there wasn't a lot of tension at all, because it was like, whoever wins, that means we're going to be together.
Right.
Yeah, one of us is going to, have to leave and quit their job, but yet,
but
we're going to have a lifetime
before
together.
we answer, what was the final score? Don't say who won, but what was the final score?
I'm embarrassed, Scott. I don't
remember
the final score.
You were betting your...
I know. You would think that something as momentous as this occasion,
all right, so
you would remember the score, but...
Who moved?
So my U-Haul showed up in Boise, Idaho about 4 months later.
All right.
But I didn't have to quit my job. I was the first remote employee that the National Potato Promotion had. Right. It was kind of ironic, because actually the day that, so I got back from Boise, got to Denver, and we were having this long-range strategic planning meeting going on, and at this hotel facility, and all these potato growers from around the country were there. And I was walking in, my boss was walking out. I was like, why is he leaving? He got fired that morning. Oh. And he was the guy I had to ask permission to, hey, Doug, it's either you got to give me permission to work, in Boise, or I got to quit. And so that's why I actually had to, they had to hire a new person. And literally, I had to wait 4 months for the new person to get on board. And literally, like the first week on the job for the new CEO of the potato board, I had to walk in. I'm like, they don't really know me that well, but I need to move to Boise. And can you let me work from home in Boise?
Now, did you tell the CEO you needed to move because you lost a bet?
I did not tell him about the hockey game losing a bet until after he allowed me to move. But yeah, so he goes, "Oh, you're right. I really don't know you, but let me talk to my executive committee." And the executive committee said, "Yeah, we want to keep Chris around." Right. So they were really gracious in letting me move.
So we got you from Oregon, we got you in Colorado, we got you in Idaho now. So how did we get you back to Washington, or not back to? How did you end up in Washington?
Oh, yeah. So got married and started a family, and our son was a difficult pregnancy for my wife. I think my wife went into labor at 22 weeks. Mm. And so, we really she was on bed rest and, struggling to keep that little guy in her. And so it was a lot of stressful trips to the hospital to try to stop contractions. And then eventually she gave birth to him about 2 months early. Okay. And he was early, his lungs weren't developed enough. Couldn't breathe on his own, so he was in intensive care for a few weeks. But, it all worked out. He had kind of a hole in the heart, but everything worked. And then as I think going through that kind of trauma for your first child kind of realigns what your values are a little bit. And all of a sudden, career is important and you got to provide for your family, but it's not everything. And my job really required a lot of travel. I was traveling on the road quite a bit. Okay. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have my son grow up, not knowing who his dad was, essentially, or being, a weekend parent. And so there was an opportunity actually back in Colorado, working just specifically for the Colorado growers that didn't require a lot of national travel. And so, a year after my son was born, we moved back to Colorado.
Back to Colorado.
So we moved to, if you were to put your finger in the middle of Colorado and go down almost to the New Mexico border, that's where we were at. And it's a very kind of isolated but beautiful area of Colorado. It's called the San Luis Valley. And we lived in a little town called South Fork, Colorado. And its claim to fame was the original Chevy Chase Vacation movie.
Yeah.
Was filmed. Now, a portion of it was filmed there, where he tied the dog to the back bumper and drove off.
Oh, really? Okay.
And there was a rest area. There was a rest area where Christy Brinkley was dancing in the parking lot with her Ferrari. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, Scott.
Yeah, I have.
But yeah, so yeah, our house was like, I don't know, a quarter mile from where Christy Brinkley was dancing.
The only thing that would make that story better is that you got the original station wagon from the movie, and that's what your family car was when you were there.
Well, the potato vehicle that I drove for working for the Colorado Growers was kind of the suburban version of that.
Okay, all right.
Family truckster. Yeah,
the family truckster. Well, what brought you to?
Oh, and then I'm sorry.
So what brought you to Washington?
Yeah, so after 3 great years in Colorado, and the Colorado Growers were wonderful to work for. We recognized that. Then we had another child, and it's like, we were only seeing our parents or the grandparents, maybe a couple times during a year, and it's kind of like, and our parents were getting up there in age, and it was kind of like, maybe we should see about, is there a way to get closer to home so that our kids could have a relationship with their grandparents. And so, there was an opening that opened up in Washington, essentially the same job that I was doing in Colorado, in Washington, with the Washington State Potato Commission. So, actually, I didn't apply right away. The deadline went and passed, and then the grower from Washington called me and said, "Hey, we're going through a stack of resumes. We were kind of actually hoping to see yours in there." And so that kind of was that kind of pushed me over the edge. It's like, hey, actually they. Maybe they do want me there. And so I applied, and I was hired, and then we moved, and I've been here for 19 and a half years. So it's worked out really well.
All right. But something you said earlier on in your career, when you had the choice between Charlotte and Jackson, or whatever the Mississippi town was, I can't remember. Sorry. You said you're a mountain or water guy, but Moses Lake, I mean, it's got a lake, but it's pretty flat there. There's not a lot of... I mean, you were compromising, I guess, for outdoor activities, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, so we don't have mountains right by us. We don't have an ocean right by us. Oh. But, it's all kind of within a reasonable drive. I'm kind of a big-time skier. So Mission Ridge outside of Wenatchee was kind of the whole mountain. And that's, an hour and a half away. Yep. So, not unreasonable. So
do you go to,
get a chance to get
do you ski at Mission a lot? Or did you? Or
yeah, I used to a lot at Mission, and now my son actually graduated college recently and is now one of the marketing directors for another ski resort. That's his dream job. He graduated in sports business management, and so he worked for a soccer club in Arizona for a year. Wanted to get back to the Northwest. He's kind of a mountain ski guy. Right. I got him started when he was 3 years old, and I got a job at Lookout Pass, actually, which is right on the border of Idaho and Montana. Literally, like half the resort's in Idaho, and the other half is in Montana.
So you go the other direction now. You head east to go skiing. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a longer drive now. Now it's a 3-hour drive, but at least I can spend the weekend with my son.
So the Washington Potato Commission, for the listener that isn't up on what these type of trade organizations do, what's kind of the history of this, and what's its current focus?
Yeah. So back in probably 1955, the potato growers in the state came together and said, hey, man, there's a lot of things we got to do for our industry that none of us can do on our own. None of us can hire an entomologist or a pathologist to help us with potato research. None of us have enough money to do, promotions in Chicago. None of us, have the ability to represent ourselves in Olympia or Washington, D.C. Why don't we come together collectively and sort of have a mandatory tax where everybody kind of has to pay in a little bit? So they went to the state legislature and said, hey, we'd like to create a potato commission. We don't want funding from you. We'll fund it ourselves. Mm-hmm. We just need that sort of mandatory taxing authority. And so right now, every potato grower pays 4 cents for every 100 pounds of potatoes that we grow. And when you kind of pull those 4 cents together, it works out to, roughly between $3.5 to $4 million, depending on the year. And our number one focus, Scott, is really on research. Mm-hmm. So how can we grow more food using less resources? So less fertilizer, less water, less pest control products. Mm-hmm. And how can we increase yields on an acre of ground?
So I'm a little confused. So are you saying that the potato growers petitioned Olympia to basically tax them on production.
Yes.
And that 4 cents, 100 pounds is collected by the state of Washington.
No, actually, the state's not even involved in it. It's collected directly by the Potato Commission.
So okay, but is it technically a tax that's levied on production?
Yeah, it's called an assessment.
Assessment. Okay, so it's an assessment.
Yeah.
So they've mutually agreed, and the state set the assessment up, and then, so I'm a potato grower. I grow 100 pounds of potatoes. I give you 4 cents, basically. And then we pool we're obviously dealing with lots more than 100 pounds at a time, but you get the idea. Okay. All right. So one of the things that I'm kind of aware of in a very loose way, but I wonder if my audience is aware of this, is that Washington State is a very large potato growing region.
Yes.
They're not the largest producer of potatoes in the U.S., though, correct?
That is correct.
Idaho,
On Idaho has more acres than we do and produces a total production of more. But kind of our claim to fame is our yield, our per acre yield, is the highest in the world. So even though we don't have the total production that Idaho has, just because they have more land mass to grow potatoes, we actually have the highest yields in the world. So. And to put it in perspective, so we're roughly about 23% of the nation's potato supply, and Idaho is about 28 to 29%.
So really,
supply.
between Washington and Idaho, about half the potatoes in the U.S. are grown in Washington and Idaho.
Yep. Yeah.
Where's the other half grown? What other states are big potato producers?
So then it goes to states like, and they're all, probably North Dakota. I think it'd be third, a fair amount grown in right on the kind of the border of North Dakota and Minnesota. Okay. Probably a little bit more in North Dakota. That's called the Red River Valley. The Red River actually, I think, is the dividing line, of the state of North Dakota and Minnesota. And then Colorado is the second largest fresh potato. They don't have any processing or very little processing in Colorado, so it's all fresh potatoes. And then Oregon is right up there with Colorado. And then you get into states like Wisconsin would be probably kind of next in line, and Michigan, and then Maine. Technically potatoes are grown in all 50 states, but the top 10 are kind of in the northern tier of the United States. So kind of from Maine all the way to Washington.
So what is it about Washington State that allows us to have the most production per acre?
Several things. Well, one is the volcanic soils are awesome. Okay. It's just the right texture and consistency for growing potatoes. And then also the long growing season. We actually have a pretty long growing season compared to any other potato growing region in the country. So that, the longer a potato plant is alive, the more and bigger the potatoes will grow. And so that's another reason why we have high yields. And then our ability, most of our potatoes, about 90% are grown on the east side of the Cascades, maybe 92%, and then about 8 to 10% is grown in the Skagit Valley, so north of Seattle. Right. In the desert of central Washington, we only get, 6 inches of rainfall a year, precipitation. So we have to irrigate the potatoes in eastern Washington. And so we're able to literally, with our irrigation systems are so high tech now, we can deliver the exact amount of water exactly when the plant needs it. So other portions of the country don't necessarily have that. They have to deal with thunderstorms during the summer. Right. So anytime you throw up a bunch of water, into a potato field, and if it rains 2 inches and it's got to sit there, well, you're able to rot the potatoes because all of that excess water, or it creates a really rich environment for funguses or bacteria to take off and a lot of disease pressure. So we're really fortunate that desert climate and our long growing season, the ability to provide the exact amount of water exactly when the plant needs it, it really combines to just perfect optimal conditions, and that's why we have the highest yields in the world.
Okay.
And with the high yield, not only high yields, but also the most consistent quality. Potatoes are kind of finicky. They don't like big fluctuation and changes in the weather or moisture. So the more consistent you can be, the more consistent your quality will be.
All right.
And when I say quality, it means like, it's a nice kind of oblong potato. It doesn't, lots of times if it's subject to different extremes in temperatures, it'll have all sorts of growth cracks, or it'll be sideways or crooked, or it'll have nubs on it. We're really consistent.
All right.
And because of that, so we're high yielding, high quality. It's really attracted a lot of potato processors to Washington State because they know they'll have a reliable, high quality, high yields every year. And so we actually have the highest concentration of potato processors for sure in the United States. And I haven't looked recently, but potentially also in the world.
Okay.
Just because, and so roughly about 92% of what we grow ends up in a processed potato product. It could be a French fry, a waffle fry, hash brown patty, instant mashed potatoes, potato chips. So it's a wide variety of products. And that's actually really good for the economies in a lot of rural towns because it provides a lot of jobs. We only have roughly, we count brothers and uncles and cousins farming together. We say we got about 300 potato farmers, but really there's only about 80 potato farm entities in the state.
Okay.
But yet they're responsible for almost $7.5 billion in economic activity just because of all the value-added jobs and the amount of exports we do. We export anywhere between 50 and 70% of our products. And so it has a huge impact on our economy. Roughly about 36,000 jobs are associated with potatoes. So
wow.
It's no small potato.
No small potato.
Growing potatoes in Washington.
You've been waiting to work that one in. So what is the approximate, what do you guys, I don't want to say, what's the yield per acre that they're looking for? What are these farms like trying to yield for an acre?
The higher the better.
Well, but
so okay. So in perspective, so roughly I would say the average yield in Idaho, for example, is roughly about 400 sacks to the acre, or so 100-pound sack.
Okay, 400
so
sacks, 4,000 pounds per an acre.
No, it would be
40,000.
40,000
pounds an acre. Okay.
So our average in Washington is roughly about 640 sacks to the acre. Now that is kind of misleading because there's a significant portion of our potatoes that we actually harvest early because we have potato processors. I mean, they're like $500 million plants.
Right.
And so for a company to kind of recoup that type of capital investment, I mean, they got to be able to run their plants year round,
right.
365 days or try to get close to that. And so they need potatoes 365 days. And so typically how it works is we start harvesting potatoes in July, and generally our potato processors run out of potatoes in June. So we're able to store potatoes, certain varieties, for a long time. And as soon as we run out of those, they need potatoes right away. Well, typically most potatoes, if you grow them in your garden, they're really not ready until September or October. But we have some varieties that are ready in July, but they yield lower.
Okay.
So we're sacrificing yield in July and August just to be able to kind of feed the demand for these processing.
But it's a collaborative effort here. You're providing them. They're based here. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, but we have fields that will crack. I think every year we've got fields that crack over 1,000 sacks to the acre.
Wow. Okay.
So we're growing roughly about 10 billion pounds of potatoes.
10
here in Washington
10
State.
billion pounds of potatoes.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, but this you bring up I'd mentioned one of the core missions of what we do at the Potato Commission is research.
Right.
So I've got every farmer you can talk to, they'll say, okay, I've got a field that yields, let's say, 30 ton per acre. But I've got another field literally right across the road that's at 38 ton per acre. I manage, they're very similar soils, I think, and I manage them the same way, water them the same way, take care of them, nurture them, but one is just consistently out yielding the other. And so what we really think is going on is biologically, there's something different in the soil. If the soil structures are the same types of soil, but one is yielding so much more than the other, but yet they're managed in the same amount of fertilizer, same amount of water, what's going on here? And we believe that it's biologically, it's the bioorganisms in the soil that are having an impact. So we've actually partnered with Washington State University and created about a $3.5 million endowment to hire a soil health scientist that'll specialize in potato cropping systems to help us figure that out. How can we take those lower performing fields that are only yielding 30 ton and get them up to, that 38 ton field across the street? And so we think it's really about the biology. There's something different about that soil that's making it underperforming or overperforming. And so we're trying to crack that nut. And so we've literally been pulling soil samples for the last 4 years from every potato field and doing like a DNA analysis. You take a quart of soil and there's going to be millions and millions and millions of organisms in there. And we're literally trying to get a DNA analysis of everything that's in that soil and then comparing the two. What is the biology of lower performing soils and what's the biology of higher performing soils? And then we got to figure out, okay, now that we know what the difference is, how do we change the biological populations? How do we get more beneficial organisms in the lower performing soils? And so, yeah, it's kind of a long-term effort. And I know like the state legislature, I think it was maybe 6 years ago, kind of launched a big initiative, soil health initiative for the state of Washington. And so that's also helping us get closer to that goal. But it really is a long-term study of, trying to figure that out.
During our pre-call, one of the other things you mentioned to me was kind of the origin of the tater tot. Mm-hmm. But before we talk about that, I do have a question. This may not be applicable at all, but in the apple industry, if apples, good-looking apples are sold for retail. Ugly apples, blemished apples are sold for juicing or whatever. Is there a similar correlation in the potato industry?
Yes and no. Okay. So generally speaking, if you're growing potatoes for processing, so to make French fries or even tater tots or hash brown patties, whatever it may be, generally it's a pretty high quality potato. I mean, it would look really good in a grocery store. Okay. It'd be a nice size and so forth. But now French fries particularly French fries, you got to have a really good high quality potato, long one, because you want these long French fries. Right. Nobody likes broken little pieces or small pieces of French fries in your container, right? And so you got to have that. But in our fresh market, so like growers who are growing for the fresh market, so potatoes that would end up in the grocery store or sold to restaurants, they pick out the best ones. And anything that's off grade, so anything that's got little deforms or nicks or growth cracks or anything like that, some kind of blemish on it, those aren't good enough for, if we put it in the grocery store, you wouldn't pick it up. Right. You'd pick up the nicer one right next to it. And so we take those, we call those off-grade potatoes, and we send them mostly to be made into like instant mashed potatoes or dehydrated products. Okay. And so, a lot of people think instant mashed potatoes is fake potatoes. It's not real. It literally is. I think if I were to take you to a plant, Scott, you could literally see the potatoes in a line. It's like a big trough. Depending on, there's a couple different ways to make it, but it's like a trough and it's got these mixers and a conveyor, and the potatoes start out as peeled potatoes and they go through this kind of mechanism grinder thingy. Then you can watch it and all of a sudden it looks like mashed potatoes. And then it goes into a dryer and the dryer just sucks all the water out of it. And at the end of it, it's just this powdery potato. Interesting. It's literally the exact potato you would eat. It's just all the water was taken out. And so that's actually what instant mashed potatoes is. But so that's where they don't really care if there were blemishes on the potatoes or anything like that, because they're going to grind it up anyways. And so, as long as there's no rot. They can't afford to have any rot in their instant mashed potatoes.
What do they do? She just said the potatoes are peeled. What's done with all these peels?
That is a very good question. What are you going to do with potato peels? I mean, you can't sell them. There's really not a market for potato peels per se. So they make wonderful cow feed.
Okay.
So they are hauled off to usually to either cattle feedlots or to dairies.
Okay.
And the dairy guys and the cattle feedlots, the cows love potatoes, and you can actually feed them whole potatoes. They love them.
Okay.
And so, nothing goes to waste.
I was going to say,
so, whatever doesn't go to a grocery store ends up in like an instant mashed potato, and even the peelings from there go out to cattle feed.
So back to the tater tot.
Yeah. So the tater tot. This was created, I think back in the 1950s. There was a company called Ore-Ida. Maybe you've heard of it.
Once or twice.
And their plant is literally like right on the border. The reason why it's called Ore-Ida is because their French fry plant, it was located like close to the border.
Okay.
It was like right in Ontario, Oregon, which is right across from the Snake River kind of divides Idaho and Oregon right there. And Ontario's on one side. And then I don't think there's really a city on the other side of Idaho, but it's right there. And so that's why it was called Ore-Ida, because it was kind of straddling the line, and potatoes were coming both from Oregon and Idaho. And so they were making French fries, but the guy making the French fries, as you imagine like a round potato, and maybe if you've ever made homemade French fries at home, yep. you got some type of French fry cutter, yep. Where you put the potato on these crisscross blades and you push down on it. Well, the longest French fries are going to be where?
In the center of the
potato. They're going to be coming from the center of the potato, right? And so the smaller slivers on the side of the potato, because it's narrower, smaller there, nobody, you couldn't sell that. And so he was actually having to feed all of those slivers to cows, right. Essentially, or throwing them away. And so he thought, man, what a waste. I'm like throwing away, 30%. Is there a way that, other than giving them for free to the cattle guys, what can I do with these? And he actually came up with the idea of, why don't I kind of chop them up and then mold them and squeeze them through a little machine and then just cut off little pieces off them. And that's where the tater tot was born. It literally was taking the scraps, all these smaller slivers of potatoes, kind of grinding them up and shooting them through a mold to where it produced these little kind of nugget-sized tater tots that we now enjoy. And Ore-Ida has the trademark on tater tots. Every company makes a tater tot, but only Ore-Ida can call it a tater tot. So, and Napoleon Dynamite, he calls them tater tots also.
All right. Now, what's the number one selling form of potato? How are potatoes consumed? What's the number one way that we consume potatoes?
It would be definitely French fries.
French fries
would be the number one. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's got the best French fries in the fast food business?
Oh man, I tell you what. I mean, I am a connoisseur. It's rare that I'll run across a French fry that I don't like.
Okay.
But I would say, and knowing just the behind the scenes of how a lot of different fast food restaurants operate, mm-hmm. and their attention or non-attention to their French fries, I would say that McDonald's is very rigorous about the quality.
Okay.
I would say Wendy's is very rigorous, and I love McDonald's French fries. I think they're great. I also love Wendy's French fries. I love that skin on
mm-hmm.
Portion of it. And there's several companies that use kind of a batter coated fry. Yeah. I think like Burger King has a little bit of batter on it. And I can appreciate that. Especially because generally the reason why they have a little bit of battering on it, it's like a potato starch actually. Mm-hmm. So it's what they put on there is to actually kind of retain the heat.
Oh.
So it stays hot longer.
Okay.
So I think everybody's been to a fast food restaurant and the fries are cold, right? That's awful.
Yeah.
I hate that. Burger King does actually a pretty good job because they have that batter coating on it of trying to keep their fries hotter. But I tell you what, Scott, we learned during COVID, there's another manufacturer, Conag or Lamb Weston here in the state, they came up with an interesting approach. Not only did they come up with because they were recognized, particularly during COVID, the amount of food that was being delivered, by Uber Eats or what have you. And the number one side dish for Uber Eats was French fries. That's what folks were requesting. But lots of times, French fries would get there cold or not hot. And so they actually combined a little bit of a batter coating on their French fry, a light coating, but with a special container that allowed sort of the steam to exit, because that's what was really causing sort of your French fry to go limp.
Right.
So I remember touring their facility, and they had a great product in this new French fry container. They cooked it, and it was still hot 30 minutes later, sitting in that container and not being under a heat lamp or anything like that.
Okay.
So I thought it was fascinating. And other companies are coming up with similar products now too.
All right. What's your favorite way to eat a potato? And I'm talking about not at home, but like, are you a waffle fry guy, tater tots, what curly fries? What do you, potato chips?
Are you aware of the potato diet I did?
I am. I am.
Okay. I would say I'm a mashed potato guy.
Okay.
I love mashed potatoes. There's just something so comforting about mashed potatoes. I love that. I mean, it just reminds me of home and family and sitting around the dinner table. And so I like that. I really do. I think that would probably be my favorite. But I do have favorite potatoes based on how you're going to use them.
Okay.
So, and a lot of people are surprised, like a baked potato. I actually prefer a red baked potato. That's my favorite, like a red potato baked, like a big red potato. That's what I prefer for baked. When it comes for mashed potatoes, I do like a yellow potato. A lot of people call them Yukon Gold, but Yukon Gold is actually kind of a crappy yellow potato. We've moved beyond Yukon Gold. There's actually everybody calls them Yukon Gold, but it's actually some other variety.
Okay.
And so there's some really great ones that I like for mashed potatoes. And then the old russet potato for frying.
Okay.
For French fries or for, frying up slices. That's how I like them.
So you mentioned your potato diet. So what I know is that I don't know why you did it. So that's what I want you to answer. But you ate nothing but potatoes for 60 days, and you lost weight, and your cholesterol went down.
Yeah, substantially.
So why? What was the reason that I'm teasing you, but it's almost like you're one of those like guys who goes, I'm going to sit on top of this billboard for 60 days. And whatever. So why did you do eating potatoes for 60 days? What was the impetus for this?
So it was my version of a personal protest versus what the government was proposing.
Okay.
So at the time, there's the WIC program. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it stands for Women, Infants, and Children. Yep. Think of it as sort of a supplement to food stamps. So mothers that might be pregnant or have small children, they get a little extra money designed to make sure that they have enough to deliver nutrition to their kids. Right. Not a lot. It used to be, I think back then, this was 2010 when I did the potato diet, it was roughly around $10 a month. Okay. Is kind of what they're looking at now. It's a little bit more now. But originally the WIC program was really about delivering milk to kids. It was about making sure moms, had a little extra money to make sure that their kids in the house had milk. Okay. And that's really kind of where it started. But the Institute of Medicine wrote a report and they said, hey, we looked at the WIC mothers and they're at risk nutritionally. They're at risk for being deficient in vitamin C, in potassium, in fiber, in vitamin A, and I think the fifth one was, I want to say folate, I believe. And vitamin B6, I think. And the Institute of Medicine said the best way to deliver those vitamins and minerals is really we should allow WIC mothers to use their WIC dollars for fresh fruits and vegetables. And so the Institute of Medicine said, we're USDA, because it's a USDA program, we recommend that you allow WIC mothers to meet their nutritional needs, to use their WIC dollars on all fruits and vegetables except potatoes.
Except potatoes.
Except potatoes.
Okay.
And it's so funny because it's like the Institute of Medicine never looked at a nutrition label for potatoes. And they would find that potatoes has, I don't know if there's anything that has more potassium than potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like 50% more potassium in a potato than there is a banana.
Right.
You know, people always think of potassium in bananas, but actually potatoes, a lot more potassium. Half your allowance of vitamin C comes from a potato. A great source of folate, tremendous source of fiber. You know, the only thing a potato didn't have was vitamin A.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, the Institute of Medicine was also recommending, you know, iceberg lettuce. You know, what's an iceberg lettuce? There's
Crunchy water.
very little nutrition in iceberg lettuce. So they were letting things like iceberg lettuce in, but not potatoes. And it just didn't make sense, particularly as there were so many of the nutrients of concern were actually present in the potato. So it literally didn't make sense. And I poured through the report, and the only thing, there was kind of a footnote in it that it sort of maybe hinted at, well, WIC mothers are poor and potatoes are cheap, so they're probably already buying them. Mm. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's the principle thing. If you tell, you know, because part of WIC is also education.
Right.
Nutrition education. And if all of a sudden a WIC instructor says, hey, you know, you can use your dollars to buy any fruit or vegetable except potatoes. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, a consumer's going to think, oh, potatoes must be bad for me or bad for my kids.
Right.
And so that's what we didn't want. And so literally, I think I was watching a lot of Mythbusters at the time with my kids. And it was kind of like one of those worst case scenarios. Okay, all right. People think potatoes are so bad for you, if the Institute of Medicine does, then I am going to prove them wrong by eating nothing but potatoes. And it literally had to be nothing but potatoes, because at the end of this, I had to make sure that I was isolating, you know, because if I was alive at the end of 60 days, I didn't want someone to say, well, it was because you were, you know, putting sour cream or butter on it. That's where you were getting a lot of your nutrients from. So literally it was just potatoes, except for, you know, some seasonings, salt, pepper, oregano, whatever, dry seasonings. Right. And then my doctor said, hey, there's these things called the essential fatty acids. There's no fat in a potato. Mm-hmm. So my doctor said, you got to add fat to your diet. And so it sounds weird saying it out loud, but I had to add French fries and potato chips to my potato diet to make it healthier. Because it had the essential fatty acids. And so I ate, so it was literally potatoes, and then, you know, I'd make homemade French fries or potato chips or something like that with oil occasionally.
One of the things I read, I think, was that you ate approximately 400 pounds of potatoes during this period of time?
It had to be more than that. So it was like probably about 7.5 pounds a day.
7.5 pounds of potatoes a day. Okay. And you lost weight.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was close. Yeah, 450 pounds.
And you lost weight.
Pounds. Yes.
And
I was eating 20 potatoes a day, and I lost weight.
20 potatoes a day. And so how were you?
21.
Okay, besides French fries and potato chips, walk me through a day. What were you having for breakfast?
All right. It usually started the day before.
Okay.
So I would actually meal prep, because I don't know if you've ever ate 20 potatoes a day, but it's a lot of work.
I haven't. I might look like somebody would think I did, but no, I don't.
I mean, it's like you're literally having to eat like every half hour.
Really?
I mean, there were times where I would get to, you know, it'd be 8 o'clock at night, and I only got to 12, and I still had eight left to go, you know,
but why did you bedtime. Okay. Why did you eat 20? Was that just the goal you set for yourself, or was that for a calorie count, or what was?
Yeah, calorie count. So I went online and, you know, kind of did the calorie counter thingy, okay. And it said, the guy my size, my activity level, and metabolism rate, you need to be eating 2,200 calories a day.
Okay.
And a potato is 110 calories. So it literally worked out perfect.
Wow. Okay.
I had to eat 20 potatoes a day to maintain my weight.
All right.
Which I did. I tried hard. So I ended up losing 21 pounds.
Okay.
So, and we did, you know, and this wasn't just a stunt. I mean, we wanted to do a little bit of science on it. So, you know, I did a physical at the start of the diet, or just the day before the diet, midway through, to make sure I was doing okay, and then at the end. And it was funny because when when I came up with this idea about it, and I was just kind of kicking it around, and I shared it with some of my growers, and they were like, "Really, we're paying you to come up? You're just going to eat potatoes? That's how you're going to solve our problems? You're just going to eat them? What?" I don't know if anybody really grasped the thing, except for one guy. One guy named a potato grower named Lynn Olson, kind of an old crotchety guy. I think he saw value in it, and he goes, and it's funny that he said this. He goes, "Hey, when you're on the Today Show, I want to come with you." I'm like, "What? Today Show, huh?" So anyways, I was kicking it around in my head. I thought it'd be kind of cool to do, and I think it would be a cool statement. But I was unsure of, the last thing you want to do is announce to the world that you're going to eat nothing but potatoes, and at the end of 60 days you die from malnutrition or something. So I had to do the math. I had to figure out, can I live off of potatoes? And I started Googling stuff, and no one had ever done this before. I had heard stories about the Irish, right, in the mid 1800s, became so reliant on potatoes, and then when the potatoes suffered a big disease in their crops, that's when they starved or they migrated, right? And I heard that they weren't eating just potatoes. It was like often potatoes and milk or butter or wild game supplementing it. And I came across a study, and I don't even know how I found it, but there was this Dr. Kahn, and I think this was from the late 1800s. He had 5 subjects that ate just potatoes for 60 days, just by coincidence. I already came up, my plan was to do 60 days, but he had folks eating potatoes for 60 days. And I would have passed it, but because the research title was something like measuring the nitrogen content in their blood on a potato diet. And I was like, nitrogen in your blood? I mean, isn't that like bad? Isn't that like, I was thinking like nitrogen bubbles, like, the bends,
right?
Like, divers, have to be careful about. But it was actually, what I didn't recognize is that nitrogen was kind of another term back then for the elements of protein. So he was actually looking at the protein levels of people in the protein levels in their blood of people who were eating just potatoes. And so that was literally the only reference I could find of anybody ever eating just potatoes for an extended period of time. And so I started doing the math. I had to learn about protein. I thought protein was one thing, but it's actually a combination. It's been 15 years since I thought about it. I think it's like 7 different amino acids that make up a complete protein. And you've got to get the right amount of each of those amino acids to complete it. And so, I did the math and figured it all out. And I figured, some of the amino acids I could get right away. Some of them I'd keep having to eat more potatoes. And so I figured out as long as I got to at least 14 of the 20 potatoes a day, I would complete my protein. And actually I ended up eating, if you eat 20 potatoes a day, I think you get like 104% of the daily recommended allowance for protein. So, and then, how much vitamin C I was getting. And then my doctor actually, he was worried about the potassium level because there's so much potassium in a potato. He wanted to make sure my kidneys were functioning because excess potassium is easily removed. If you've got too much of it in your body, it's easily removed as long as your kidneys are functioning properly. So he had to, he wanted to make sure that my overdose of potassium wasn't harmful. And so, my kidneys were working fine. And he goes, yeah, it's not going to be a problem whatsoever. And so, I did the math. And I think really the only vitamin that was of concern that I'd be short on was vitamin A.
Okay.
Because there's just kind of a trace amount in a potato. But vitamin A is one of the fatty fat-soluble vitamins. And so you actually just naturally have a store of vitamin A in your body, in your fat cells. And as you burn through fat, then it releases it. And so I figured, I for sure had at least a 60-day supply of, wouldn't be a problem, of vitamin A already in my body.
So potatoes for 60 days. You said something, and you said something, I'm curious. What I saw online was that you did about 300 media interviews. Was it during this process or after it was over?
Both. I would say it was probably definitely peaked during it and then right after it. So I would say, it still resonates with people. It was kind of one of those water cooler conversations.
It's fascinating. It really is fascinating.
Yeah. And so I still every year, I'm still like doing interviews, talking about it. And actually, last night I was with a bunch of climate researchers, and I was only supposed to talk for a half hour. And we were talking about how the climate models and what's potato growing going to look like 30 years from now, because we got to prepare for that. And I was comparing rice and potatoes, sort of from a sustainability standpoint, talking about the benefits of potatoes, and I talked about also the nutritional benefits of potatoes. And then I said, oh, and by the way, I ate nothing but potatoes. So we spent like the next hour and a half just talking about my potato diet. So yeah, it really resonates. But I forgot what the question was.
So the question is, the grower mentioned he wanted to go on the Today Show, and I think you did you do the Today Show?
Yeah,
you did. Okay,
yeah.
Did he go with you?
No, he didn't, and I'm so embarrassed because I forgot that he brought that up. I didn't remember it until after the show, and he goes, "Hey, you were supposed to take me with you," and I was like, and he was so cool because like the day I remember we had a potato meeting on the last day of just by coincidence, just a regular like potato commission meeting, the last day of my diet, and he brought me like 10 pounds of bacon. He said, eat this tomorrow,
Okay.
But yeah. We did 300 interviews. It was, did Today's Show, Good Morning America. I was on Fox, Bloomberg. And I got to do some weird, fun things. I was on radio in Ireland. I mean, that's like the highlight of a potato guy. I mean, if you can be on radio in Ireland, being a potato executive director of a potato organization, I mean, that's like a high water mark, and I got the Wiggles. I don't know if you ever heard of the kids band.
Yeah,
the Wiggles.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, it's an Australian kids group back, I don't know, my kids loved them when they were little, so it must have been from, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. They were kind of a hot thing. And they had a song called Hot Potato. And so I got to sing Hot Potato on Australian radio.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was fun. And it was funny because I promised myself I'd be as transparent as I could. I would talk, and I said, hey, I don't know if I'm going to cheat or not. And if I do, I'll let everybody know. And I said I would never turn down an interview. So, I mean, of those 300, I remember like a small college in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. I remember doing, an interview there, they probably had 8 people listening. I don't know. Because it was a college radio station, and then something is like Today's Show and so forth. So, and everything in between. The only time I turned one down was I think Fox contacted me about they wanted me to be on a show with another woman who was eating just French fries, and I looked into it, and she was mental.
Okay.
She had a mental disorder that. Just this compulsion.
Got it.
And I'm like, hey, no, that's not,
that doesn't seem correct.
Yeah. And they apologized. Like, oh, I didn't realize that. Because I think they were doing like what weird things people
right.
do, some kind of show back then.
Well, but here's the thing. You did 300 interviews, and guaranteed the audience that you reached over those 300 interviews eat potatoes. Not just Washington potatoes, but potatoes grown in North America.
Yeah.
Probably worldwide. So you were doing a big service for the whole potato industry with this in a way. But what I want to know, and we're amongst friends here, you can tell me, what food did you miss the most?
Funny that you should mention that, because that was the number one media question I would get of the 300 interviews. Okay. I think everybody probably asked me that question, or what's going to be the first thing you eat at the end of it. Kind of funny story. So about halfway through, so day 30-ish of the 60 days, I was getting a fair amount of media attention at that point. And the first people to call me were the Washington cattlemen. They said, hey, Chris, at the end of your diet, we'll come to your house. We'll set up the barbecue grill in your driveway. We'll cook up some nice juicy steaks for you and your family, for you to have as your first meal. And the apple guys call, the dairy guys call, the spirit, so it just kind of went down the line. And I know all these guys, we're, ag's a small community, and I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So I actually kind of came up with a fun idea. So Moses Lake has a Head Start program that does a lot of the WIC education and daycare and so forth. And so we I talked to all my friends, all my commodity group friends, and we decided to, why don't we go in and come to the Head Start Center and make a big Washington commodity meals for all the families that participate in Head Start. So yeah, we had Washington wheat tortillas and Washington beef carnitas, and we had asparagus and ice cream and milk, and of course potatoes and apples. And so it was really neat to have all those commodity groups come together and kind of celebrating the end of my diet and sharing a meal with, the people that I was doing this for.
Would you do it again?
I mean, I don't know if it would make a difference.
No, but asking, would you do it again? Would you?
So I proposed to my commissioners to kind of take it up a notch, take it to the next level.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do was essentially repeat it, but really put potato nutrition to the test. Because when I did it the first time, I was just, working in my desk, not doing anything. And now what if I was to ride my bike across the United States?
Oh,
powered by potatoes. Literally eating only potatoes.
Okay.
And I thought that would be kind of taking this diet to the next level to really prove how nutritious a potato is. I mean, because maybe a guy can eat potatoes and get healthier, but what if you put it to the test? Like an endurance type athlete, could you get across the country and still be healthy and full of energy at the end of a bike ride, riding your bike 3,000 miles? So,
well, what you could do, I'm just throwing this out as a possible idea for you, is you could have the fry truck, your fry trailer, follow you, and you could have fries all the time. So now
well, that would be the intent. Actually, you got to have a support.
Yeah, you got it.
That would
now
prepare meals, whether you're steaming potatoes for me or making French fries.
Now, one of the things, you were interviewed by the Cascade Bicycle Club, and you're going to do the STP this year, correct?
Yeah, right. I hope so.
And this will be your third year?
Third year. Yep.
Okay. And the Washington State Potato Commission has a French fry trailer that you park at kind of the halfway point down the central area, and you provide French fries for the participants.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I love it. It's a long line. People just really appreciate it and are just so thankful to get that. So
where else do you guys take that? Where else does it go? Because I want to show up. That's kind of why I'm selfish. I'm looking up, where are you going to be next? But
we've just been kind of talking about. Actually, we talked about this morning, because we used to do just kind of random pop up. I think the first time that we did it, we would just show up. I think we would do like social media contests and say, hey, where should we go?
Right.
And kind of leave it up to people. And I remember we've popped up at, different like fire stations around the state, just randomly, or show up in parks, and, let people know, hey, we're going to be in Bellingham today at, station 32 fire station, come get your French fries. And so we did a little bit of that. It's kind of gotten, that was fun doing it. It really was. And I kind of want to restart that again. But we're kind of short on staff right now. And so it would be hard to be able to kind of staff that anymore. But we'll be there definitely for
the STP.
For STP.
What's the longest you've ridden a bike? are you going to do the STP in 1 day or 2?
2 days. So I kind of opened it up to like some potato friends.
Okay.
And so a lot of them have never done this type of thing. So I want to do it in 2 days. And I've always done it in 2 days, but I'd really like to try to do it in 1 day. I think my longest bike ride, it was probably, I rode home from a potato meeting. I had a potato meeting in Walla Walla.
Okay.
And I rode back to Moses Lake, and it was 125 miles.
Okay.
So I think that's
the longest. Okay.
The longest. And I didn't really train for it. Oh. So I was kind of feeling it the next day.
Yeah, that'd be.
And towards the end of it. And oh man, this is the worst thing ever in my life happened to me on that ride. So I left Walla Walla, and you kind of go from, as you head west you got to leave west, head out of Walla Walla towards the Tri-Cities, and then you turn north up to Moses Lake. And you got to kind of go up some hills. and I'm going up the hill, and the wind is blowing. I've got this like 20-mile-an-hour headwind into me, and your body's just like this sail, and it just slows you down. And riding a bike in a headwind is like the worst thing in the world. And so I'm just crawling up this hill. It's a hill, so it's already going slow. And then I got this wind beating down on me. I feel like I'm just not making any progress. And out of nowhere, by 100% coincidence, there's this the Idaho Potato Commission has this gigantic potato that they haul around on a semi-truck for their promotional events.
Okay.
It literally passed me driving up this hill. So here I am, the Washington potato guy, getting passed by this Idaho Potato Commission semi-truck with a big potato on it. It was the most humiliating thing that's ever
I'm sorry to laugh at your pain, but I'm going to laugh. That's awesome. All right. So when you're not helping promote potatoes in Washington, what do you like to do for fun? What's kind of fun in the Moses Lake area? What do you like to do out there?
Really anything outdoors.
Okay.
I was I know it's kind of weird to say this out loud, but for my 50th birthday, I got a skateboard.
Okay.
My wife gave me a skateboard, and I think she also increased my insurance policy. But yeah, I was a 50-year-old skateboarder for a while. And then I had one bad, I think I broke my wrist 3 separate times in a year. And so now I've kind of backed off.
Have you ever been to Maryhill down in the gorge?
Yeah.
Have you ever skateboarded down their hill?
Do people do that?
Yes.
I would.
Yes. I interviewed this husband and wife who own a coffee company, and he's a longboard rider, and he's probably about our age, not a young guy, right?
Uh-huh.
And he rides a longboard, and so they gather there. These are competitions and events.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they ride down that hill, and his daughters, they do I'll say like a luge. They sit down and ride down this thing. So
oh my gosh.
So you should go try that. I mean, they're wearing full leathers, and I mean, it's
we can't. I can't have my wife listen to this podcast because
it doesn't exist. I just made it all up. It's okay.
She'll blackball me from.
No, I mean, it was fun. Like he's wiped out a few times, and anyway, it's so skateboarding. All right. I mean, yeah. I'm not coordinated enough. I can't ride. I would just be in traction, and I'd be that body in full body cast like almost instantly.
Well, I was in a cast 3 times that year.
Oh my gosh! All
right. We're not. Our house isn't on the lake, but it's across the road from a lake, and so we don't have a boat. And my kids felt like they had just an impoverished childhood growing up because we didn't have a boat, and we lived near the lake, and they didn't have a dog or a trampoline.
Oh,
so but we kayak. And so actually I'll kayak to work occasionally. So our office isn't too far from the lake either. So I'll jump in the kayak, and it's about a 2-mile kayak.
Okay, you're the first guest to say that they've kayaked to work. So that's kind of cool. So good. That's very cool.
Yeah. So the lake is fun. We got sand dunes now. My wife won't let me get a dirt bike either, but we've actually have some really nice sand dunes. Actually, they're probably really popular for anybody who's kind of does the off-road thing.
Yeah.
It seems like most people that are sand dunes are from the west side or Seattle area. So that's really popular. And actually, I think NASA was like testing, they were testing like their rovers out in the sand dunes because it was kind of mimicking Mars and so forth. I love fly fishing.
Okay. So where do you like to go fly fishing?
There's a Rocky Ford. There's a creek, or kind of a small stream that comes into Moses Lake, and there's a fish hatchery there, and so that's always fun to go and fly fish there. Just have a blast doing that.
Have you gone
I love getting up in the mountains too, but it's so easy. Just at the end of Moses Lake, I can pop in there and get some fly fishing.
Have you done the Yakima? Have you fly fished the Yakima River?
Yeah.
I've heard that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Got a cattle raft that I'll take on the Yakima, so I can kind of paddle my way and do a little bit of fishing as I do that.
Okay.
So that's a lot of fun.
So most important question of the whole conversation is, where's a great place to get coffee in Moses Lake? Because that's what I'm about.
Yeah. There's lots of really good places. But I would say my favorite, there's a place called Mason's Coffee.
Yeah, I've been there.
In Moses Lake. No way, have you
I've
really?
been to Mason's, yeah. I wrote I think I told you, I did 100 cups of coffee in 100 days.
Oh, yeah.
And Mason's was one of them I went to.
I just kind of like I know the people who own the building, actually. They're kind of connected to the potato industry, and they lease out to different folks.
Okay.
They just needed some office space. And it was actually like an old Sears building, I think.
That would make sense, yeah, thinking about it.
And so I think they got a good deal on it, and then they renovated it and created, different areas for different shops. And they're very generous people. They give, several nonprofits office space and so forth in there. But yeah, Mason's, it's just kind of a quiet little place. And just the people are really kind, and it's kind of divided in half. You can kind of sit where the coffee machine is, or you can kind of walk across a hallway, and there's kind of a little more secluded area. So it's kind of nice. I like getting out of the office once in a while and kind of working away from, just even sometimes a couple hours, if I can get away from sort of the interruptions and go to a place like Mason's and hook up to their Wi-Fi and get some work done. I love that. And I love, and they do a really good job creating the crema on my Americano.
So is Americano the go-to for you?
Yeah, that's my go-to. I don't believe in any cream or any additives to it. I just like pure coffee and crema off of an espresso machine.
There we go.
And I got to admit, we've got a nice little espresso machine in our home, and so I'll have a couple Americanos in the morning right away.
There we go. So. Lunchtime in Moses Lake. Where should I go for lunch?
Oh, there's an Indian restaurant I haven't tried yet, and I've been meaning to do that. It kind of depends on what your mood is. Now we have, there's a place called Michael's Bistro.
Been there.
That's kind of nice. I like that. They've got a nice outdoor patio. They got a really good beer wall. I don't know if they had the beer wall when you were there.
I don't think so.
Yeah, you can kind of buy it by the ounce, just sample.
I like that idea. Okay.
20 or 30 different beers. I can't remember how many I've got. That's kind of a fun place to go to. But there is this I'll call it a dive bar, and although I might be offending Ram, the guy who owns it. But there's a place called Ram's Ripple, or we call it the Ripple.
Okay.
And it's this tavern, but they got the best darn fried chicken.
Oh.
It is just so good. So either, it's funny because I'll go there with my pastor. I'll take him to a dive bar and we'll eat chicken. And I love that. And so it's just great food.
I think we got the beginnings of a joke: a potato guy and a pastor walk into a bar. I don't know. I don't know where we go from there, but okay.
I know we should work on that.
So you mentioned they have great fried chicken. Do they do JoJo's?
Yeah, great JoJo's to go along with the fried chicken. Okay. Yeah, really good. And they got and you can have French fries also, or tater tots. So yeah, they do a really good job on potato products.
All right. As we wind this thing down, is there anything? Well, I got one more. So what's the near future look like for the Washington Potato Commission? What do you kind of see the future of potatoes in Washington over the next, 5 years?
That I wish I had the crystal ball and I could tell you, because actually we are in a period of such uncertainty for multiple reasons. One is, the whole government deal.
Right.
There's a firing or laying off of certain government personnel that we rely upon, particularly when it comes to research. We still have industry problems, research things that we need to figure out, and we've lost some of those resources. And then the strangest thing happened. Our dominance has always been the Pacific Rim. So a lot of the potato processors are located in Washington because of our easy access to the deep water ports of Seattle and Tacoma. And so, and good freight, maritime freight service out of there to the Pacific Rim. And so, like I said, we've exported 50-70% of what we grow to the Pacific Rim. But just in the last 2 years, China and India have literally come out of nowhere and have really putting a lot of pressure on us. They've just ramped up their potato production, ramped up their French fry production, and are now really giving us a serious run for the money in the Pacific Rim. And so we're trying to, trying to figure all that out. I mean, their quality isn't quite the quality that we have, but they are taking a lot of that sort of what we call lower tier business away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Philippines has been a really nice market, for example, for us, but it's a very low cost market. I mean, there's still a lot of, you know, kind of poverty in the Philippines. And so they're looking for really cost effective products. And so, China and India have really kind of taken that away from us. And so our exports are going down. And so, and then the whole tariff thing, you know, how are we going to be affected by that? You know, there's a lot of uncertainty on that. You know, we're sort of in that pause phase, but once that pause is lifted, you know, there are a lot of countries that could impose retaliatory tariffs on us, which again would further erode our opportunities to export. So there's just kind of a lot of uncertainty. And so actually, we're at the lowest potato acreage that we've been at in over, 25 years.
Okay.
We have been capped out at 165,000 acres of potatoes. That's the most that we can grow. Because for every acre of potatoes you grow, you actually have to set aside 3 acres on the side for rotation crops. Because you can't plant potatoes after potatoes on the same piece of ground. It'll just build up too many disease pressures, funguses, or and so forth in the soil. And so you got to rotate. And so there's only roughly 165,000 times 4. So there's roughly, so we've got about 660,000 acres that are tied up, but we can only use a quarter of it at a time.
Right.
And so there really wasn't an opportunity for us to expand anymore unless somehow, we were able to get more water out of the Columbia River to land that currently isn't irrigated right now. That was really our only opportunity to expand. So really for the last 10 years, we've had to tell all of our international customers, hey, we're going to put you on quota. We can't meet your demand.
Wow.
Because we're maxed out. Well, that day is gone now with China and India kind of stepping in and filling that gap. And the U.S. and also what kind of contributed to that too is the U.S. stopped signing free trade agreements. Mm-hmm. Probably 8 years ago, and but our competitors have signed them. And so, Australia grows potatoes, New Zealand grows potatoes, Canada grows potatoes, EU grows potatoes, wow. And now they're all also in the Pacific Rim because their product is cheaper because they're at 0 tariffs, right. and we still have tariffs in a lot of the countries. So, yeah, and so we're still trying to figure out, how are we going to adapt to this new environment? Now, there are some opportunities. So, for example, Japan, we can sell French fries to Japan. We can sell fresh potatoes to just 2 potato chip manufacturers in Japan, but we can't sell any other fresh potatoes to the grocery stores or restaurants. And so, I think this, and we've been struggling, we've asked for access of our fresh potatoes in Japan. I think we approached Japan like 20 years ago, and they just stall, and they're just not being responsive to our request. And so this whole tariff thing is actually gives us a little bit more leverage, or the administration has a little leverage now. So if Japan wants to continue, exporting their products here, so maybe now they'll, in exchange, from them to continue to export to our country, maybe it'll open up the market for fresh potatoes in Japan, and that would be huge. So that would make up for, a lot of the losses that we're experiencing in the other countries. So, yeah, we don't know what we are right now. So that's kind of the sense of uncertainty. And because generally potato growers are always optimistic in the spring. I mean, even if they had a bad year the previous year, it's like, okay, we're starting fresh. New year, I'm optimistic. But this year, there's just that sense of uncertainty that's really kind of hanging over all of us, just because we're experiencing things we've never experienced before. And will there be any resolution? So
got it. All right.
So it's kind of a bummer. I don't want to finish on a downer.
I got really. One last question that you promised me. I didn't tell you what it was, but you promised me you would answer it. Remember this. Man, okay, so I'm going to hold you to this.
All right.
This is a very important question. It's a simple question, but I need to know your answer, and I need to know the reason. Okay?
Okay.
Cake or pie?
Cake. White frosting.
Why?
Man, I don't know. I've just been a fan, and it's like nobody in our office really is a big fan of white cake, white frosting. So we always do cakes for birthdays here in the office, But thankfully, we hired someone recently in the last 6 months who also likes white cake, white frosting. And it doesn't have, and I don't like the fancy way. I mean, I like the, where you get your cake from the grocery store, bakery. Right. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. But man, I don't know. There's just something about that. Maybe it's, I don't know, like the wedding, the old traditional wedding cakes. I don't think they do those types of cakes for weddings anymore, but it used to be that way. And that's the cake I love. Okay. But ironically, like, I hope my mother-in-law doesn't listen to this podcast too, because she is convinced that I love pie, like pie more than anything.
Really?
And I don't know where she got that, because I think when we were living in Colorado one time, I was eating a piece of pie, and she visited, and all of a sudden was convinced that I just love pie. And so she's always making pies. And I take them, but I'm not a pie fan. I want white cake, white frosting.
I'm laughing because all right. I'm an only child, and I'm also an only grandchild. So I have a really small family, right? And every year at Thanksgiving, my grandmother, on my mother's side, that was where my mother was an only child as well. So my grandmother would cook Thanksgiving dinner. And every year, Scott, would you like a slice of pumpkin pie? I no. As a young, I don't like pumpkin pie. It's like, no. And, I just remember her every year would go, since when? And I was like, what? Forever? Anyway, so it's like, sometimes people just forget things. So, maybe that's what's going on there. She just, I don't know. My grandmother just couldn't remember. And it kind of, I don't know if she was joking with me, as I grew up and this became a joke, that she was just pulling my chain. I don't know. But I really do think that she just completely forgot that I'm not a fan of pumpkin in almost any format. So,
that's hilarious.
Anyway, so.
That reminded me of my potato diet, actually. And this proves how I'm not a smart man, because I could have started this diet anytime I wanted to. Mm-hmm. I started it October 1st.
Oh.
So if you go October 1st and go out 60 days, speaking of pumpkin pie, for Thanksgiving, I had to eat only potatoes. So I cooked up like I think I made a big old pot of mashed potatoes. At that time, it was Yukon Gold potatoes. Shaped it into the form of a turkey. Put a little oil on it, brushed, and put it under the broiler. Browned up actually pretty nice. But I also made, I got mashed potatoes, put it in a pie pan, orange food coloring with the pumpkin pie seasonings, and then added just the yellow Yukon as a crust on it, on the top of it. And it was awful. Pumpkin pie seasoning and mashed potatoes don't go together whatsoever. But the mashed potato turkey, that was the most tender turkey I've ever had in my life. So thanks for bringing up pumpkin pie.
Chris, thank you for sitting down with me today. This is really, I was talking to a couple of my friends about it. I'm going to be interviewing the guy for the potato commission. They're like, what? It was just this what? And I go, no, this is going to be fun. I just know it's going to be a good time. And it has proven to be, you tell great stories, and I learned more about potatoes and Washington ag in general. And I think that's for me, I get to learn something, so I'm happy. And I hope that you have a successful STP ride, and that the fry truck sells out. Well, I don't want it to sell out. I want you guys to serve every rider and then have nothing to bring back. Like you nailed the quantities perfectly. And I'm gonna keep following and find out where I can find the truck. But one thing we didn't talk about, and I'm sorry that this is at the end, and I'm going to somehow put a blurb so people listen to the end. That's kind of selfish of me, but anyway. You guys, the Washington Potatoes, and I love your URL, potatoes.com, have a bunch of recipes. What's this TV thing going that you've got?
Oh, yeah. Washington Grown, our TV program. Yeah, there was a time, I think we did a long-range planning meeting, maybe 14 years ago, and it was weird, but our growers said, hey, we're really worried about the consumer just not understanding where their food comes from anymore. So let's actually pause promoting potatoes, mm-hmm. which was weird for a potato grower to tell us that, because that's one of the things that we do. And they said, let's just really kind of promote telling the ag story to the public, mm-hmm. so everybody gets an idea of where their food comes from. And so, we were planning on just making some sort of farming videos and, posting it on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And as we talked to our production company, they said, well, for the amount of work you guys want, what would you think of a TV show? Or like a potato TV show? I mean, who's going to watch that? They go, no, we could open up to, other ag crops and so forth. And so that was the birth of Washington Grown. So now you can catch it literally throughout all of the state. So it's literally, it's a food and agriculture show. So we always start every episode like sitting, in some restaurant, maybe one of Tom Douglas's restaurant in Seattle. Maybe he's making potato dish, teaches you how to do that. And then we go to the potato farm, we'll interview the potato farmer, talk about, what it took to grow that crop. And then maybe we'll meet with an extension agent and then talk about, one of the pests that potato farmers have to deal with. And then we'll go to a food truck that's doing something really cool with potatoes. And then we might talk to a nutritionalist, talk about nutrition of the potato. But we do this for every crop. And so we'll do grapes and asparagus and apples.
Right.
And pears, and it's been a fun, and so we're working with all the ag groups in the state, and it's been great. And and not that we were ever out trying to win awards, but the awards are, I think, really a reflection of the quality of the storytelling. And so we've actually last year we won our 4th Emmy award, and so we're pretty happy about that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I think you can catch it. I think Cairo in the Seattle area, and then also on PBS. And it's actually, I think we're the only TV station that you can find both on commercial TV and public television.
All right.
Which is kind of unusual. And I think, again, that talks about the quality of the programming. But literally throughout the state, you can see it everywhere except Vancouver, because they're served by the Portland market, TV market. And the Portland TV stations didn't want to show a Washington Grown show in Oregon. So, but they can catch it online. wagrown.com. You can catch it there, and we've also got our Washington Grown YouTube channel.
All right. I had one last question. This is my own personal question for you. Okay.
All right. Fire away.
Potato chips.
Yes.
What's your favorite type of potato chip? Are you a ridge chip guy, or are you?
Yeah, definitely a ridge chip.
Why?
I like the texture of a ridge, and I just like that. I like it's kind of crunchy, but it's sort of kind of softish a little bit, depending on what ridge you get. And I just like that. I don't like, my family loves kettle fried chips. That's not me. I mean, I'll eat them, of course. They're great, but I would prefer to have a ridge. And I'm a plain chip guy. I'm not big into a lot of the flavors, essentially, unless I go to Canada. Then I always get the is it all dressed, I think, seasoning that they put on there.
Okay. All right.
How about you, Scott? What's your preference?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that because I'm kind of waffling. No pun intended there. I think I'm a ridge chip guy too, and I most of the time I do prefer just plain, salted sea salt. I like them with sea salt. Yeah. Like things like jalapeno, or there's always these joke bags of Lay's tries to come out with like the, I'm not sure what they were thinking. Well, let's see if they'll eat this. And, no, but I'm probably just a ridged, plain old chip. They're low.
Yeah. And they're sturdy enough for dip.
Yeah, they're sturdy enough for dip. Absolutely. So
I appreciate that.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this, and I wish you and all of our Washington growers success.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. I had a blast. So maybe we can do this again when I ride my bike across the United States eating only potatoes.
I would like to be on the support team if it's got the fry truck. I'm just putting that out there. You said you were short-staffed. I might, anyway.
Deal.
All right.
Deal. All right. Thanks, Scott.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. Glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.